Professor Gates, I should say.
Do you feel okay?
Yeah.
He's on a tight time frame. He has a very sincere commitment with the class of engineering students or engineers to be, right? So we're going to let him kick off his presentation, and then we'll copy everything else down.
Okay, so I do have a hard deadline, and I will definitely be speaking quickly in order to meet that, so we'll get through these things pretty quickly. So what you see here is actually just kind of an overview schematic of what we've referred to here in the here at MSU as the MSU Mobility Studio. And John, this morning with the kickoff talk, spoke briefly about this. What is the MSU Mobility Studio? It's an integrated system of communication and control for autonomous vehicles and their environment. Now, what you'll hear after me will be a much broader explanation of the vehicle itself, the Canvas vehicle. So the connected and networked autonomous vehicles for active safety. Hyder will give an excellent talk about that and probably answer any question you'd like to know about the sensor technology and the vehicle capabilities. But what I'm going to talk about are some of the others, is more of the infrastructure side and the planning side. A little bit less developed on campus at this point, but the dam is about to burst. And I think if we came back a year from now and we're talking about this, we would have a lot of interesting things to talk about and lessons learned. At least I hope that's the case. So how is this transition to AV, and I should say AVs, NCVs, how is that impacting transportation and research at MSU? So I'm going to kind of give you the faculty side of perspective. So we are obviously expected to do quite a bit of research, bring in grants and contracts, a variety of funding agencies. MDOT's been a major funding agency, but also federal agencies, industry, and other state partners as well. So we have, I'm going to split this into two talks really. One will be kind of focusing on these initiatives that we have, and specifically emphasizing the MSU Mobility Studio initiative, and we wrap the kind of the Canvas and what I would say the campus infrastructure part of it in with the Mobility Studio. And also maybe just briefly talk about some of our potential collaborations with the American Center for Mobility will run, and then also MCity, University of Michigan. Obviously, the two primary testing facilities that are at least being discussed quite frequently right now. But also these paradigm shifts with our current research. So we've got amongst myself and my two colleagues in transportation, on the civil side of transportation research, the traffic research side, we've got existing projects that are going to be impacted by autonomous vehicles. And some of these are actually continuing projects. They have a fairly lengthy lifespan to them, and they might actually be impacted by autonomous and connected vehicles out on the roadway. Okay? So talking about, for me, I'm a traffic safety driver behavior guy. So I'll talk about the impacts to some studies on driver behavior and traffic safety, the impact on statewide network modeling that my colleague Ali Zokai is doing, and then the infrastructure planning models that my other colleague Renaz Gamami is working on. So first, the campus side. So let's talk about the smart transportation infrastructure at MSU. And we'll start right here if we take a look at this. This is the Smart Columbus visions. Columbus won the Smart Cities Initiative recently. I forget how many were submitted, how many cities submitted a proposal for that, but I think it was in the 70s. Columbus was awarded as the winner. So we're not trying to replicate this in a full extent, but what we're trying to do is find our niche as on campus. So what can we do from a smart infrastructure standpoint to fit in? Where can we fit in? Okay. So let's focus first of all. What does MSU have? Well, MSU, and you'll hear people claim these statistics, and I'm quite certain they're true. Nobody's refuted them. But MSU maintains the largest campus-owned network of roadway miles, traffic volumes. Okay, so we have Shaw Lane, which cuts through campus, that essentially operates like an arterial roadway. Okay, much to the chagrin of our administrators, and maybe that won't always be the case, but we do have a major thoroughfare through campus. We have a massive network of traffic signals. I know the numbers, the actual stats are on your sheet there, one of the handout sheets. I forget the actual number. I think it's 27, somewhere in the 20s. And right here, we have a huge amount of pedestrian bicyclists. And I guess you could throw mopeds on there as well. volumes. Okay? So there's been a recent initiative, and we've established some committees to discuss these things, but there's been a recent initiative from MSU's upper administration to implement smart signal infrastructure that would include sensors and control software, would include data collection devices, etc. Okay, so what does this mean moving forward? Well, it really kind of makes MSU as sort of a quasi, if you will, test bed for potential autonomous connected vehicle movement research. It could impact just my research in general, my colleagues' research. We can collect data on these things. Right now, we can't even collect pedestrian movements unless we just send somebody out there and count. Pedestrian movement right now is counted manually, and that's pretty much everywhere. I've tested some automated data collection devices to various levels of precision, but right now it's just manual. That's the most reliable method. But if we can get a method that equipment that actually can, using machine vision or some sort of a sensor that can collect pedestrian information, where are they coming from, where are they moving to, what's the count, then we're actually moving forward. So we're hopefully going to be able to get some of those things on campus fairly soon. Okay, so if we combine this smart infrastructure with the large PEDs and bike volumes and then numerous large campus events, right? Football games bring a lot of people onto campus. Graduation. Okay, so we have a lot of large campus events. We'll be, as a campus, fairly uniquely positioned to implement a variety of applications, which might include things like real-time optimized traffic and ped routing. Can we modify our class schedule? Right now we have our peak demand for both pedestrians and everybody coming onto campus is, right around 9 o'clock, right? So we have all the pedestrians trying to use the crossing facilities, and we have vehicles interacting with them, and it's really an unsafe situation. Now, it's better than it used to be, because we now have an actual traffic engineer, traffic safety engineer on campus that monitors these things. When I was a student, we had, I believe, at least one fatal ped accident per year, ped or bike, and that doesn't happen anymore, at least not very frequently. I actually witnessed a bicyclist get hit when I was a student at MSU. So things are better, but there's still improvements that can be made. Actually, the one thing that I find to be the most dangerous, and I really want to study more, is the situation John showed earlier, where you have where you have at least 2 lanes in each direction, and you've got, let's say, a box truck riding in one lane. That box truck might be slowing down, but the person riding next to that box truck can't see that they're slowing down for a pedestrian. And I always say, I know people have this yielding mentality, but don't yield for that pedestrian. If they're, don't slow down and wave them by, especially if you're in a large vehicle, because that vehicle coming up beside them, especially if that pedestrian's distracted, which we know they are. Okay, that's how most of our collisions with pedestrians happen. Is somebody's trying to be nice and wave that ped across, and the person riding beside that other vehicle doesn't see them. Okay. Traffic management during major events. Okay, so right now during our major events, we have the MSU PD out there operating the traffic signals. Can we operate that from a centralized control center? And the answer is yes. So can we do all that traffic signal manipulation from a central control center? Emergency and incident management. So now, in addition to this is similar to the large event management, but if we have incidents that occur, okay, on campus, how can we evacuate? Okay, how can we control our signals to evacuate? How can we communicate with autonomous vehicles when we have them on campus? How can we communicate with pedestrians via an app, with students via an app? Sensor-driven parking support app. People are coming onto campus for a football game. They want to know where to park. Well, right now it's just kind of search and find technique, and just look for the ones that don't say parking full, or look for the ones that don't say parking $40 or passes only or whatever. Right? You try to get as close as you can, and I know people have studied this, parking algorithm, parking routing, but for football games, nobody does it. They just find what's ever close and convenient, or where they're meeting their friends, or whatever looks to be the most fun tailgate, etc. Okay, so but how can we have that such that we have an app that will tell us where, or tell the vehicle where to drop off or to park? Okay, so this is all coming. And of course, there's research possibilities. First and foremost, like I talked about, we've got this campus resource that has a very suburban, I know the map here shows, it kind of calls it an urban. I wouldn't call the main campus core a dense urban environment. It's not like a downtown, it's not like downtown Detroit or Chicago. It's more of a dense suburban environment with a lot of pedestrians. That's the one thing that we do have that functions like a dense urban environment, is we have a lot of pedestrians. Okay, so we can have campus because Public Act 332 says that public roads in Michigan can serve as autonomous vehicle, or serve the purposes of autonomous vehicles. They can drive on them. Okay, so we on campus do have the opportunity to run these vehicles on our roadways, and we have a lot of pets. Okay, so these pet and bike interactions with vehicles. Okay, and we, if we have these sensors that are equipped on the traffic signal infrastructure, if we have the signals themselves are upgraded, and I have found a lot of interesting tidbits today about what if we just took the drive? How does a pedestrian respond to the vehicle if there's no driver in the driver's seat? What do you think about that? I'm thinking more of the interaction between the vehicle sensing the pedestrian, and not all pedestrians are created equal, right? Either. Okay, so we talk about some of these test facilities that have a cardboard cutout with arms. Oh, what if that person's using a walker? That's a metal walker. Okay, they're not swinging their arms, are they? Okay, the metallic part, so how does that interact with the sensors and with all the detection devices on the vehicles? Okay, so there's a lot of things that are going on here. Just differentiating between a small pedestrian, a child, versus a taller pedestrian, somebody that's walking very slowly, somebody that's crawling, what have you. There's a whole lot of things that can be researched here. Vehicle sensor performance. Hyder, I won't steal any of his thunder. He can talk more about that, and he's got some interesting things to show in his presentation, I'm sure. And then improvements to optimization algorithms. So just the optimization of our traffic signal timings, the splits, the cycles, the offsets, like John talked about earlier. How can we optimize more of the industrial process? How can we optimize the traffic flow on campus? Okay, so now let's talk about some of the disruptions. So we talk about this transition from a fully human-operated system to a fully automated system. Okay, and that we know that much of my career is going to be spent in the in-between, that transition. So we have a certain percentage of autonomous vehicles and a certain percentage of human-operated vehicles. And when I say autonomous vehicles, please forgive me, I'm including connected in there as well. So current research project, driver behavior impacts. Okay, looking at how speed selection varies for specific drivers as well as across different drivers. So we've collected all this data. We partnered with a group that's collected all this data from a naturalistic driving study. Okay, 3,000 drivers agreed to have their vehicles implemented. Okay, eye scanning, got all sorts of things, forward view camera, etc. So looking at driver behavior as a function of the speed limit, as a function of the roadway geometry, traffic characteristics, other drivers. And what we're trying to do is assess the linkage between the driver's behavior and all those external factors, linking that to risk of a crash or a near crash event. Okay, so we have all that information. But how does this change with autonomous vehicles? How does all this change with autonomous vehicles being mixed in with the human-operated vehicles? Okay, so that's going to be something that will impact this paradigm shift. Second example. Okay, so we've developed all sorts of safety crash prediction models for the state of Michigan. We can tell you how do rumble strips affect crashes, how does lane width, how does shoulder width, how does a signalized intersection versus an unsignalized intersection. Of course, this is all human-operated. This has no presumptions of any sort of autonomous or connected vehicles in here. This is just all based on historical data. So how are these going to change? How are these models going to change? And then the work of my colleagues looking at travel mobility models for the state of Michigan. I know you can't see this very well, but this is the freeway network for the state of Michigan and Southeast Michigan, modeling things like travel mobility models and the impacts of peak travel periods, so congestion, recurring congestion, weather, large sporting events or other sorts of events, conventions across the state, incidents, lane management techniques, high occupancy vehicle, hot lanes, so toll lanes, reversible lanes, congestion pricing, which we don't really have those in Michigan, but how are those impacted by autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles? The roadway work zones, I didn't really point that out much too, but roadway work zones are going to be a huge area of research, of R&D. Okay, so you got this vehicle that's driving along, and it's, you know, and it sees cones or drums or, you know, construction equipment. That lane's no longer there. You've got a lane closure, and you're being moved out. So how do these vehicles react to what I would say temporary traffic control that's put out by humans? Okay, not a typical lane striping, but barrels and drums and cones. Okay, so there's a whole variety of things, and signs as well. We're relying on humans to put those things out such that an autonomous vehicle can understand them. And then infrastructure planning. So where do we put the charging stations? So eventually we're going to have these electric vehicles, you know, and we obviously have charging stations already, but there's going to be more and more of them. So where do we put them? How do we plan our infrastructure? How do we plan where to put the sensors, data collection devices, etc.? So one of my colleagues has developed an infrastructure planning tool that helps establish these, answer some of these questions. Okay, so that's going to change a bit too. Although she's kind of on the cutting edge and she's already preparing for this, that's going to change. So that's my talk. That's really all I have. And like I said, I do have to leave right at 4, so I did try to keep it short and sweet. And John can easily answer many of these questions if you have any additional questions. But I could probably take, you know, a question or two right now before I have to depart, if you'd like. Like I said, the vehicle side is all going to be the next talk, or one of the subsequent talks here from Hyder, so I won't really answer much about vehicles, but...
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
You know, there, just within the last couple of days, there have been just tremendous conversation about campus as being a place where we could experiment with this. And as you said, you know, our football crowds and our visitors to campus, how will we inform them that this place is different, this place operates differently?
That's a really good question, and that kind of links with what the gentleman from Canada mentioned, is that, you know, marketing this, advertising it, making sure that you're communicating with your customers, I guess, is very important. I don't necessarily, I haven't thought that far yet. John probably has, I really haven't, but I mean, there's going to have to be. There's definitely internally visibility of these sorts of discussions and knowledge of these discussions, but John's probably better equipped.
Let me comment on that. So I would use different language. We won't be experimenting.
Yes, I was just going to say that too.
We will certainly be observing and measuring and studying and improving, but not experimenting. Those are somewhat different things. But nevertheless, I think really the key to getting people on board with this is to show them the value added. They really have to see some tangible benefit. And if that benefit is 5 minutes less waiting time to get out of the stadium, that's a big plus. People will appreciate that. If it's, you know, remapping them so that they take 6 different routes out rather than everybody piling into one route, I think they'll get that. So it has to be tangible things that they can see and measure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was very cautious on the word choice. Test bed is probably even.
Well, I don't think that would be unlike someone, a citizen, would come in and ask, how are we going to do this? So I need engineer talk, engineer speak, right? I know that you're a real reality check, John, because yesterday and today you said, we are not building vehicles here. Mm-hmm. You know, we are looking at how we can connect vehicles and infrastructure and people and so forth. And that was a very important point of clarification for me in the audience yesterday, too. Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Gates. Appreciate your time.